Hey everyone, so 2024 was a monumental year for me. I started a Booktube channel, I started a Discord, I got a chance to connect with so many of you, get book recommendations, and give recommendations in turn, and somehow I read 50 books. Don't ask me how it happened, but somehow I was able to read that much, and maybe it's because of the excitement of getting to talk to you all. So, I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. These are all the books that I read in 2024, tier ranked for you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. I'm a composer, now also booktuber. You can find my music in The Wheel of Time Season 2, His Dark Material Season 3, and the newly released psychological horror film Dead Whisper. So, as I was mentioning, somehow I had the most productive reading year I've ever had in my life, and I'm not really sure how that happened. I think, it's when you have a booktube channel and you get a chance to interact with people in the community, you're extra attentive and you extra kind of set aside time in the day to get reading done. But realistically, it shouldn't have happened. I mean, between the Booktube channel, the Discord, getting ready for read-alongs, and then taking vacations last year. I went on a cruise for a week. I got a chance to work on a bunch of music projects. So this should not have happened. I'm not really sure how it happened, but I'm glad it did. So I'm going to tier rank all of these books. And I just want to give a caveat that this is my personal list. This is not about the books that I actually think are the greatest of all time or anything like that. This is just my personal enjoyment. So this list is going to be different for every single person who watches this video, and to keep that in mind. So I would love to know also in the comments where we agree and where we disagree, because that's the fun. Variety is the spice of life, right? And we get a chance to kind of see where each other's, things rank on our own list. So if you like this kind of video, please like and subscribe. And now on to the books. So this is kind of in no particular order. You're going to notice there's the S tier, the A tier, B, C, D, going down in quality. It's kind of standard. I didn't really do anything different with those, but let's kind of jump on into these books. So the first book, these are also in no particular order as well, because I just uploaded them all as one batch, and some of these are out of order from when I actually read them, but I read them all in 2024. So without further ado, the first book is George R. R. Martin's A Dance with Dragons. Now, this is book 5 in A Song of Ice and Fire, the last book he wrote in the series, and presumably maybe will ever write, who knows, Until we hear anything definitive, we won't know. But I read the first 3 back to back to back, one a month, with a good filmmaker friend of mine. And I thought they were some of the best fantasy books I ever read. And it really felt like the hype was warranted, I never felt like, oh, this is a little overrated or anything. Now, flash forward to Feast of Crows, and I felt like that was a dip in quality for me. Personally, I didn't like the different structure of it as much. So how did A Dance of Dragons stack up? For me personally, I gotta say it was a return to form. I felt like the highs were extremely high. It still had a few plotting moments compared to the first 3 books, but I think the way it ended was such a cliffhanger. I was extra pissed that we may never get another book again, or we don't know when we're going to get one. But as far as Dance of Dragons is considered S tier book for me, I really, really enjoyed this. Let me know if you thought similarly, or if you felt like it kind of paled in comparison to the first 3 books. But I would love to know in the comments. Then the second book is Abaddon's Gate. Now, this is book 3 of The Expanse. A lot of people find this to be the weaker entry. For me, it was interesting because there were parts of it I liked less than the first 2. But there is a pivotal shift that happens that you can tell it's going to have far-reaching consequences for the whole series. And when this particular, I don't want to give too much away, but when this particular new frontier is being explored, it feels so unique. I mean, James S.A. Corey's world building is phenomenal in this book. And so I really loved it from that aspect. Was it as good as the first 2? I don't think so necessarily. But I would say I would probably rank this as an A. I thought this was a really good book. Also, to let you know, as I go through this, I might reorder stuff kind of depending on how I feel about it, because I'm giving you my unedited kind of gut reactions to these things, but I'm going to kind of go through the list as I can. So 2 really good books. Now, this third one, All Systems Red, this is part of the Murderbot series by Martha Wells. Now, it's being adapted into a TV series, so I figured I'd check out the first book and see what I thought. To be honest, for me, it didn't quite land. The idea, the premise was fantastic. You know, this robot being the sole kind of POV that you're seeing in this, like, you know, empty world, right? And I thought that that concept was great, but I was already kind of getting bored of this very short 150, 180 page book, I think it was, if I remember correctly. I was already getting bored towards the end, and it kind of made me feel like I wouldn't want to continue. Now, is this a horrible book? No, I think there was some redeeming qualities about it, but I don't know that necessarily it's a book for me. So personally, I would probably put it in the C category. Now, Assassin's Quest, I got a chance to read both Royal Assassin and Assassin Quest as buddy reads. So Assassin's Quest is the third book in the Farseer trilogy, and it is book 3 of her Robin Hobb's 16-book epic, The Realm of the Elderlings. So how did this stack rank for us? I read this with John from Disquiet and Dragons and Ellie with Bibbidi Bobbidi Books, who I'm linking both below. Wonderful booktubers you got to check out. But we really had a good time with this one. I thought kind of one thing that Robin Hobb does really well is she analyzes characters' grief or very human emotions, and she doesn't just do time skips and kind of like gloss over them. She really makes you feel like you're going day to day and experiencing what they feel like. Loneliness, isolation, grief, alienation. And you really feel the tragedy of what Fitz is going through in this third book. The first half for me, S tier, completely S tier. Now the second half, kind of, there were a few choices that were made that didn't really land for me. I felt like the ending felt a little rushed, which was a shame because I think the middle was more plotting. Now, am I going to continue? Absolutely, because her, you know, not as good book is still a fantastically ranked book. So I would still rank this in the A category, probably put it behind Abaddon's Gate at the moment. Now, Living the Beatles Legend, this is kind of a different one. As you can tell from this list, it's pretty widely read, right? So there's fantasy, sci-fi, horror, historical fiction, and even memoirs. And this is a memoir. So Living the Beatles Legend is about Mal Evans, the roadie for the Beatles, who ended up taking a bigger, more prominent role as, you know, his career progressed, and he even ended up being a co-writer on a couple of the Sgt. Pepper's tracks with Paul McCartney, which he didn't get credit for, and kind of a tragic story, actually. But fascinating book on, you know, probably one of the most talked about bands of all time, right? There's so many books about them and stuff. But this was one of the few books that, even though it was published very recently, it gave you very new information because you're seeing it through the POV of somebody who was there on the ground floor and gets to know the Beatles as people, as, you know, he's playing the role of assistant. So fascinating book. I would definitely put this at the top of S tier. And I know this is going to sound blasphemous to all you Song of Ice and Fire fans, but I think I liked it even more than Dance of Dragons. That's how good it was. It's not just the bias of being a Beatles fan, but I think it's just very special and unique in the world of the Beatles. So if you like the Beatles, definitely check out that book. Don't sleep on it. It really does give you new information. Now, Joe Abercrombie's Best Served Cold. This is the first standalone, book 4 in his 9-book epic of the First Law. Very flawed characters. This particular one is more of a contained revenge story a la the Count of Monte Cristo, but done in a way Joe Abercrombie can. It's my favorite book of the First Law series so far. I've read about 5 of them. And so I would put this in S tier. I think I might even put this over Dance of Dragons because the pacing was just perfection. I never felt like there was a dull moment. Not a dull chapter, not a dull POV, not a dull character. You really, like, it kept you guessing till the very end that there was more and more behind each corner and each page that you were turning. So fantastic book. Highly recommend you check this one out. Definitely read the First Law trilogy so you can get more of a backstory on some of the other characters that are mentioned, though, before you go into that book. So that was what I felt about the Best Served Cold. So next one is Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. So this particular book, I feel two minds about it. So when it first started, you know, it was pitched to me as a medieval horror, which I thought that's so cool because, you know, you have the Black Plague, and that in itself is its own horror, and the book explores that. But then you also have this kind of supernatural horror, almost like a fever dream in a way Stephen King would have written or something like that. And I love that aspect of the book. I would say if I was to rank the first half of the book, it was S tier, no problem there. After that, it took a little bit of a turn to the point where I think towards the end, it got more surrealistic, and I kind of would have loved it to stay a little bit more grounded in the world they were in. So I would probably give this an A tier ranking. I would still put it above Abaddon's Gate. I think this was top of A. I think it's a fantastic book and very unique in the world of horror. So definitely check that out if you have not yet. Now, this one is called Caliban's War. So this one is book 2 of the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey. And think of it like a Game of Thrones in space. It's got a little bit of heist. It's got kind of a larger arcing story that's going to take place over the 9 books. So how did the second one compare to the first book? Now, Leviathan Wakes was phenomenal. I love that one. And this follow-up was very good. I don't think it was quite as good as Leviathan Wakes. I felt like it was kind of treading over familiar territory in a way that I think Abaddon's Gate did better than Caliban's War. So I'm going to probably put this one maybe at B, I would say. But solid B, top of B. I think this was a great book. I really enjoyed it. I don't feel that it was the highest of the highs for The Expanse, but I thought it was very good. Now, Stephen King's Carrie. This is an interesting one, and I am totally biased. Okay, I'm gonna say that right now because I watched the movie growing up dozens of times. Maybe 50 times or something. I would not be surprised if it was that much. And the movie means a lot to me. Brian De Palma really took the best parts of the book, and I think he ended it in a way that I liked actually even better than the book. But for Stephen King, coming up with the idea, and this being his first published novel, for it to be that good, deserves to be top A for me. So I'm definitely going to put it right here. Not quite the S tier heights that he reaches in later entries, but definitely one you shouldn't skip out on. Even if you've seen the movie, I think you would really enjoy it. And the way it ends is quite different to the movie. So if you want a comparison, you should definitely check that out. And actually, I'm going to see if I can link you a video here where I talk about the comparisons between the adaptation and the book. Where did each fall short and what was the strengths behind that? So definitely check that out up there if you so choose. But moving on. So when this summer, I was in London visiting my grandparents and I got a chance to read some great books. This was no exception. Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End. Now, I had watched 2001 Space Odyssey, loved it, wanted to get into Arthur C. Clarke, the guy who wrote the book, but I didn't want to read 2001 because of the comparison trap that you can have, watching a movie and then wanting to compare it to the book. But I'd heard great things about Childhood's End. The basic premise is, what if humanity could be saved from itself by an outside force? What would it cost humanity to do that? And it explores that in a couple hundred pages. And it blew my mind. I mean, this is S-tier book, absolutely. I would say it's probably even better. Would I say it's better than Best Served Cold? I don't know. That's a hard one. Okay, I'm going to keep it right behind Best Served Cold right now. But this is S-tier material because Arthur C. Clarke packs a punch in it. And even though it was written decades ago, it feels like it's forward-looking. It's looking into our future, possibly, It feels prescient for the times even today. So I don't know how he did that. He's a magician, I think. But love this book. So do not sleep on this one as well. Cibola Burn is James S.A. Corey's Expanse Book 4. Now, funny enough, I think I enjoyed this one more than any of the other. I would put this maybe up close to the first book. But I don't know that I necessarily remember a ton more about it. The political intrigue starts getting more complex in this one. I remember they were expanding out a little bit further, after the books of the events of book 3. Where would I put this? I would say maybe let's put it right above Abaddon's Gate because I did like it. I guess it doesn't want to move. Okay, there we go. So I did like it. There were not as many high highs in the book, I felt like, but it's already setting up what's going to happen. So I'm excited to check out. I think Nemesis Games is the 5th book, but it's already showing me the direction it's headed. And I think as a whole, it was a stronger read than Abaddon's Gate. So putting it there. Now, this goes back to one of the earliest books I read in 2024, and I started Tad Williams' Otherland series. Now, if you don't know Tad Williams, he's written the Dragonbone Chair, the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy, which is a fantasy trilogy that was influential to George R.R. Martin for Song of Ice and Fire. But he also wrote in the mid-90s kind of a sci-fi epic called Otherland. It's a series of 4 door stoppers. This is the first one. It's called City of Golden Shadow. It is so interesting, very Dark Towery. Starts off with different POVs. It almost feels like a historical fiction thing. There's a Jack and the Beanstalk story for some reason. And all these things feel like they can't be related, but they actually are. And it takes place in this kind of fictional, kind of future world where everybody is kind of able to use VR headsets and stuff and explore virtual worlds. And it's got like a dark grittiness. It's got epic fantasy. It's got sci-fi. It's got a little bit of kind of prescience for the future because, this was written in the mid 90s and still, I could see this becoming a world 15, 20 years from now. Ray Kurzweil always talks about the singularity. Like I could imagine humans merging with AI and some of these concepts taking place. So pretty terrifying, pretty amazing. I'm looking forward to checking out the rest of the series at some point. I don't know when I'm going to because my schedule is so stacked in 2025, but I'm going to try to fit it in at some point. But I would say this was, for me, an S tier book. Is it as good as a Dance with Dragons? I'm going to put it ahead of Dance with Dragons. I think this was not quite the heights of Childhood's End, but it had very revolutionary concepts. So I'm going to put them kind of side by side there for you all. Okay, let's go to Cujo. So Stephen King's Cujo. This could have and probably should have made my top 10 books of 2024. This was a perfectly paced Stephen King novel. If you want one of his greats where he doesn't shy away from difficult topics. I mean, it starts off being about a rabid dog, right? That's kind of on the surface what you think it's about, but it's so much more. It's about family dynamics. It's about marriages. It's about neighbors. It's about doing the right thing. It's about kind of like self-preservation. There's so many different kind of human elements that are explored in this, and it's kind of sad too because like when you think about it, it's not Cujo that is a monster. He's afflicted by rabies. But when you're facing something that is going through this affliction, to you, it's like a monster. And Stephen King really explores that as well. And the ending is one harrowing read. So I would say this is S tier for sure. I might even put this above Childhood's End, honestly, because I felt like this one, I'm biased towards Stephen King. You could tell I have a whole shelf dedicated to the man back there. So I just love Stephen King. I think this just felt like one of those types of books I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. So top of S tier, close to top of S tier for me, above Childhood's End, maybe not quite as good as Best Served Cold, but really up there. So this one, did I do this wrong? I might have done this wrong. Okay. So I meant to put the thumbnail for different seasons here, but I somehow did Shawshank Redemption by accident. I'm sorry about that, you guys. But basically, this is supposed to be Stephen King's different seasons. I'm going to put a little title change here so you could see that. But this is a set of 4 novellas. It includes Rita Hayworth in the Shawshank Redemption. It also has Apt Pupil. It has The Body, which was adapted into the 80s film Stand By Me. And then it also has The Breathing Method. Now, 3 out of these 4 are S tier. I thought Apt Pupil might be my favorite because it's just a very different, unique, kind of harrowing read. I loved Shawshank Redemption, of course. The Body was fantastic as well. The Breathing Method, less so, but I thought it was still, I would put that A tier. So if I would put where this would go, probably bottom of S tier. I feel like I had a lot of S tier reads, you guys, this past year. So I feel very fortunate in that. But it's no small part due to you all. You kind of helped me choose some of these, so thank you. So I would say this is definitely worth your read, Different Seasons by Stephen King. Okay. Disquiet Gods by Christopher Rocchio, book 6 of the Sun Eater series. So if you know anything about me, you know my love of Christopher Rocchio and his wonderful Sun Eater books, taking place 20,000 years in humanity's future. Now, I loved the second and third and fourth books. Might be that it's kind of a toss-up between those 3. Felt like the highs of the series. The 5th book to me was a little bit of a step down, but I loved it. I still loved it. I would still probably rank it on the low of the S tier. That's how good it was. So where did the 6th one rank against the other 5? I would say that this is my favorite Sun Eater book. It's hard to say because, it's like the second book, you really see a hard left turn that Christopher Rocchio makes and the concepts that are introduced. And it's a very tightly written book, I think. Even with the kind of world hopping and things like that happen. This one is way more sprawling. There's more Eldritchian, almost horror elements. There is kind of a setup for what's going to take place in the 7th and final book. But, there's kind of a little bit of a reset for some of the characters based on the events of book 5. Not to spoil anything, of course. And so you kind of go like, where is this going to go. Some of the characters had exited the page, and some temporarily, some possibly forever, who knows. And so it was kind of a turning point for the series, and I felt like this is some of Christopher Rocchio's best writing yet. His prose is just incredible. He is able to balance what should not be balanceable. I know that's not a word, but it's kind of like if you think about Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, right? So many different things are being balanced. What I felt about was the strong suit with this particular book, Disquiet Gods, is he really balances it expertly. I would say this is an S tier book. Where would I put it? It's hard to say. I think I would probably put it, I would say, I think I'm going to put it above Childhood's End, actually. But Cujo is just perfection to me. Okay, I'm going to put it right behind Cujo, but it's still in the S tier. So great book, fantastic read, highly recommend. Okay, now kind of taking a step down here. This is Stephen King's Dreamcatcher, and I love Stephen King. But this one didn't quite do it for me. I'll say the first third of the book, S tier. Some of his best coming of age kind of friendship story. And then it takes a turn and it starts to become about bowel movements for some reason. A lot of flatulence in this book. So to Stephen King's credit, he was in an accident. He was doped up on morphine and things like that as he was recovering, and he was writing this book in the hospital. So of course he's going to be a little out of it and stuff. It's not going to be quite his return to form, but it was still good. But I wouldn't say it was great. I would probably put this, I don't want to give it a C, do I? It's definitely bottom of B. Maybe it just wasn't, I think I'm going to have to put it top of C. I don't think it was his best work. I think it was definitely, one of his, probably bottom quarter for me, but there was elements of it that I still liked. So it was divisive, I guess I could say. Let's talk about Elevation, because this is an interesting one. Now, Elevation was kind of it's almost like a novella, it's like 180 pages or something. Barely could be classified as a book, but it is interesting because it kind of takes the thinner concept, the idea of a guy losing weight, but he kind of changes it a little bit because it's even though he's losing weight, when he steps on the scale, he's the same weight on the scale. But he's getting skinnier and skinnier. Now, what would happen to your bones if that happened, from a physics standpoint? And then, of course, how would he be perceived in the neighborhood? And there's like some dynamics between him and his neighbors and things like that. It's also about kind of coming to terms with mortality. It's a beautifully written book, and I actually really liked it. I thought it was very charming. I wouldn't say it's Stephen King's best work by any means. I would probably put it in a solid B, though. I don't think it was C material. I think some people feel very divisive on it, but I liked it. I thought it was great. I really, really enjoyed this book. So take a look at it if you're looking to be a Stephen King completionist. I wouldn't say it's for casual Stephen King readers, but I will say that it was quite good. Now, going back to Return to Form, this is one of Stephen King's newest books, Stephen King's Fairy Tale. So this came out a couple years ago, and the way I had heard about it was the first half is a coming of age story. And Stephen King does coming of age better than most in the business. The second half is more of a fantastical tale. It feels a little bit like Talisman meets Dark Tower. It's got that fever dream, nightmare dream kind of scenario in it. A lot of people didn't feel too good about the second half. Now, I must be the minority in this. I did this as a buddy read with Cliff from Cliff's Dark Gems, a wonderful booktuber. Got to check out as well. I'm linking him down below. And we both felt like this was Stephen King, best of both worlds, literally and figuratively, the kind of the world that you see. And then of course, the world of the where the fairy tale aspect of it takes place. And honestly, I loved both. I would say this is an A tier book for me. Where would it rank? I think it would rank it higher than any of these. Maybe here? Yeah, I would say I would feel comfortable saying that. Not quite the... Well, would it be better than Carrie, actually? Hard to say. Carrie is so revolutionary. But okay, if I'm talking about pure enjoyment, I would have to rank it higher than Carrie, right? If I was to say in terms of influence... Carrie, of course, would be ranked highly. But I think in terms of personal enjoyment, as I was reading it in the moment, I would say I liked Fairy Tale quite a bit. I would put it top of A for me. Now let's look at this one, which is quite different. Every once in a while, I like reading books about productivity because, as you can tell, I take my goals very seriously, maybe too seriously. But this guy, Ali Abdal, who's a YouTuber, productivity YouTuber who I follow, I decided to read this one. I read it on audio. And for me, I've always had trouble with audio, except for I find it pretty easy to digest audiobooks when it's nonfiction. If it's something like this, I'm able to digest it pretty easily. So where would I rank this? I thought it is a really good collection of great advice. Is it original? No. Is it groundbreaking? No. But if you want kind of a concise book with some actionable methods to kind of keep you honest in your productivity journey, I guess I would say it's quite good. So I would probably put it bottom of B. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing I'd read again, but I'm glad I read it. I have no regrets. Now this one is The Gallant by Jenny Wirtz. So this is a novella, and it is kind of the prequel to her Wars of Light and Shadow series, which we are starting a read-along in 2025. We just started the first book, so if you want to join at the time of this taping, please check it out. There's a Discord channel below as well, where you can kind of get signed up to read along with us. But I wanted a little bit of a taster to see how Jenny Wirtz's writing would be before we jumped full on into her 11-book magnum opus, The Wars of Light and Shadow. So how did I feel about this Gallant? So only 100 and something pages, right? She packs a novel's worth of character arc in this. Truly. I'm not a big fan of romances in fantasy as much. I mean, if it's well earned, then I love it. If it serves the characters, I love it. But romance for romance's sake is not my personal taste. This book was fantastic because it doesn't do that. It always serves the characters and it's believable. It deals with the themes of sacrifice, duty, of love, of kind of adventure. Very fascinating, kind of introduce some interesting characters in it. It has a pretty heavy ending. And I gotta say, one of the highlights of this was Jenny Wirtz's prose. She is so gifted with the pen, like to the point where every sentence I feel like it's like, if you see like puzzle pieces that just fit perfectly, from a construct, every sentence cascades into the next and each word dovetails into the next one. It's art on the page, but then also it serves the story and the characters. So I could not be more impressed with this. This is S tier. Absolutely. It's definitely better than different seasons. Oh, God. Okay. I'm already going to be reordering these. I can tell. So I'm going to put this in S tier. I'm going to put it behind different seasons, but I'm going to put Dance of Dragons actually behind The Gallant because I think this was better than A Song of Ice and Fire Book 5. That's how good it is. So if you want a taste tester for Jenny Wirtz's writing, this is the perfect place to start. But so the next book is a new author for me, Adam Neville. So I wanted to kind of get into some more horror authors that were not Stephen King, because otherwise I just read Stephen King the whole time. So Adam Neville, this was the first book I chose. So House of Small Shadows. So I remember this book, I read this earlier in the year, but I remember this book being atmosphere top notch. He was really good at painting scares, even when there was nothing quite scary happening, but from the POV of the main character, the paranoia made certain things that were maybe could have been taken as not scary, actually scary. And he paints that picture really well. I thought the first 2/3 phenomenal. The last third really fell off a cliff for me. I felt like the ending was not that great at all. For me, didn't really do it for me. I would probably say that the ending was so not for me that I would put this behind Dreamcatcher in C. I hate to do that. I really hate to do that. But it just didn't do it for me for some reason. I don't know, but I'm still, even though I'm putting it here, I'm actually excited to read more Adam Neville. So let me know in the comments what you think I should read next from the guy, because I would love to check out more of his books. I'd heard The Ritual is good, and Last Days, I think, is another one that's supposed to be very good. So I don't know. I'm definitely gonna give him another shot though. Okay, let's go to another memoir. So this one is Michael Richards' Entrances and Exits. So I was always fascinated by Seinfeld growing up. I loved watching that show. That was one of my favorite shows of all time. And of course, Kramer was one of my favorite characters. So I was interested in hearing him talk about his life kind of before the camera, his method of working on Seinfeld. And then of course the terrible incident that he I guess, perpetrated at the Laugh Factory, and kind of how he canceled himself and did some introspection after that. And it was just it was a fascinating book on a person's artistic, spiritual, and personal growth. So really love this book, actually. I would probably put this in A. I don't know it quite probably didn't meet the heights of Assassin's Quest. It's kind of hard to, how do you really compare a memoir and then fantasy book? But whatever, for the sake of this list, right, please bear with me. I'm going to put this behind Assassin's Quest, but I thought it was a solid A book. And if you're interested in Seinfeld, you're interested in the man, he gives us an unvarnished look at his faults as well. And he takes full blame for, the things that he did as well. And so I from an, just looking at it from an honest viewpoint, it was nice to see someone who both celebrates his own strengths and admits his flaws. So fascinating book. So the next one is actually by a dear friend of mine, Zach Kampf, who wrote a book called Monsters with Middle Names. So I got a chance to be one of the first readers. I really loved this. I loved watching Dexter, on TV when it came out. And if you like Dexter, you'll probably like this. And specifically the Dexter books, actually, it kind of feels like that. It's a serial killer who's trying to stop. There are a lot of really cool twists and turns, great play on words in this. I would probably put this at the bottom of A, but I really, really liked it. And this was his first published novel. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where the rest of his writing journey takes him. But really enjoyed this one. Leaving the link to that also in the description if you want to check it out. It's a solid book. It's a page turner. And there's no really wasted chapters in it. So the next one is My Heart is a Chainsaw. So I really wanted to like this book. For all intents and purposes, this should have been a bang home run for me. I thought that there were things about it I really liked. It was my first Stephen Graham Jones book, so I was quite excited from the outset. I felt like the way it handled, serial killers and fans of those types of movies, it gives a lot of lip service to that. So I like that. I thought the main character was a little too obsessed with serial killers and serial killer movies, to the point where that was all she talked about. And it started to kind of detract. Like, it was a little distracting at times because, she would talk about it every conversation she would have. And then every postscript in each chapter, there was like a journal entry talking about it again. So it felt a little too much for me. The end felt a little ham-fisted. I would put it in C. I would probably put it below, I think higher than, I think I'd put it below House of Small Shadows. Just didn't quite do it for me. I will definitely read more Stephen Graham Jones, though. See if he's for me for other books. But also, I found his prose to be a little distracting as well for me. I think the style just didn't really gel with me. But this is kind of where I'm putting it for now. So this is the table flipping, unsubscribing part of this video, I'm sure. So I read The Name of the Wind finally. And I was very interested because, I'd heard from a lot of people that Sun Eater was the story structure is influenced, by The Name of the Wind in some ways. It's somebody recounting their life, unreliable narrator, kind of interesting from that standpoint. So I wanted to read what, the hype was all about with this book. Of course, I've heard it's one of the greatest books in all fantasy, and I read it. And I will say, Patrick Rothfuss's writing, beautiful. I really liked specific aspects of Kvothe's journey, right? I really love the intro. I think the problem I had with this book is, if somebody thinks really highly of themselves and they're only telling everything from their lens, you kind of don't see them, their weak points, You see them treated terribly maybe, but it's never their fault kind of a thing. And I would have liked to see the character take a little bit more agency. I felt like The Sun Eater, what that series did well was it did everything that I wished for in this book better, I think. And the prose is incredible. You know what I mean? So for me, this one didn't quite gel. I would probably put this bottom of B, guys. I don't know. I almost want to say C because I really felt that much about it. But let's put it bottom of B for now. I'll kind of rearrange as I go and, kind of maybe when we get to the end of this list. But interested to hear if you all agree or disagree. But, this is all personal opinion, right? So we can always agree or disagree or agree to disagree. So the next books have a special place in my heart. I read the Idan trilogy, kind of all in a row. Philip Chase, Booktube's own Philip Chase, Dr. Fantasy himself. And Dr. Fantasy knows a thing or two about fantasy, right? Because he is a lover of fantasy. He philosophizes about it. He knows so much about kind of the how to tell a really good story. You know, his prose is incredible. His world building is incredible. And for me, he is a pillar in his kind of aptly named transcendental fantasy. He uses is influenced by Buddhist and Hindu philosophy, and he kind of incorporates this into a Norse fantasy realm. So really fascinating. I liked the first book. I thought, you know what? Let's go in order, actually. I'm just going to move this over here. I liked the first book a lot. I would say that it felt a little bit more tropey than some of the later entries, but I love the way it starts. It's got this holy war, and there is a supreme priest named Bledla who thinks, you know, he's doing the right thing in the name of Idan. But, you know, it talks about religion and how it can also be used as a tool to manipulate the masses. I really like those aspects of it. Dayraven, I felt like his character really came into its own in the next entries. So for that reason, I would probably rank this the lowest of the three, but I would still rank it pretty highly. So I would probably put this one maybe here. I think that feels right. Yeah, kind of bottom of A. I still felt it was a great book, but didn't quite reach the heights of The Prophets of Idan. So The Prophet of Idan, this was a very interesting and unique book because it's a book 2 of a 3-book series. Presumably you think it's setting up for book 3, but what Philip Chase does is he takes a left turn and he gives you an ending for this that makes you feel like, where is he going to go from here? And I just love that. It was such a bold move. And it sets up book 3 in the way that you don't know what to expect in book 3. I thought the characters were so much better in this. I just immediately fell in love with every single one of them. And it's interesting because it's a unique world, right? It's big. It's got fast-paced action sequences. It could get dizzying very fast, but somehow Philip Chase balances all these things very deftly. So love this book. I would put this probably right behind Fairy Tale and above Carrie. That's how much I loved it. He's beating Stephen King books on this list, right? So where did Return to Idan, the final book, rank for me? Now, this one's interesting because it's hard to... Okay, let me preface this. So the highs in Prophet of Idan I thought were some of my favorites in the trilogy. So from that standpoint, okay, maybe I would rank Prophet of Idan higher. But Return to Idan, you know how I mentioned you don't know where this series is going to go. He explores transcendentalism, about inner journey, about enlightenment. He explores themes about how can you win a war that's unwinnable, because once one side, you know, hits, the other retaliates, and it becomes this never-ending cycle of war. Is there a way out of that? And I thought that was so unique. I've never seen that in fantasy ever. I would definitely put this as a solid S-tier book. I would probably put this... I'm going to put this right here. I'm going to say this is an S-tier book. It made it on my... it made it as one of my favorite books of the year. So really, really love this book. Definitely check this one out. I love this trilogy. So this next one, sorry about this blurry image, you guys. I don't know what happened there, but this one was a reread for me because I was setting up for Wind and Truth, and I wanted to make sure that I remembered stuff, because this was the weakest entry for me, Rhythm of War. It's book 4 of the Stormlight Archive series by Brandon Sanderson. And I wanted to see how it stacked up on a reread. Well, I am so glad I reread this because, you guys, I think maybe I just have a better fantasy vocabulary now, but I love the fabrial science in it. I felt like I understood everything. It didn't feel too obtuse, and it didn't feel too like he was just going off in weird directions or anything. I actually love this book. I would put this in... I think I would put this right behind Dance of Dragons in S tier. I liked it that much, actually. I thought it was fantastic. So I was very amazed at how much I liked it in comparison to the first read along. But sometimes, you change as a person. What you like about books changes. So really, really excited to, that I got a chance to reread that one. So this next one is called The Crimes of Rooker Flynn. This was the last book I read in 2024. This is by A.R. Witham. It's a self-published novel, and it is the first book in the Locke trilogy. I did a review on it in my reading roundup last week, which I'm linking up here. I thought this was just a solid book. Very influenced by The Talisman and Dark Tower, Stephen King. If you like that kind of stuff, the weird, the kind of fever dream nightmare scenario, there's a prison break story in it. There's the legend of Blackjack in it. There's a pirate kind of fantasy adventure juxtaposition against this gritty, dark nightmare scenario that the characters find themselves in. I really enjoyed it. I would say it took me about 50 pages to kind of really get into the characters, and I wasn't sure where it was going to go. So after that start, I felt like it really picked up steam for me. I would probably put this in the A tier, not quite as high as The Way of Idan. Probably here, I think. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep it here for now. My list has been pretty stacked in the A and S tiers here. Yeah, really great reading here. So let's look at Rose Matter. So this one is about a woman escaping her abusive ex-husband. And there's some kind of supernatural elements that fell short for me, but the crux of the story that analyzes kind of domestic violence and relationship dynamics, I thought was S tier. So where would I rank this? I would probably put this in a B. Definitely above Caliban. Yeah, I'm going to put this at the top of B. I thought this was actually really, really good. And, you know, I heard that when Stephen King wrote this in the 90s, I believe, a lot of women came up to him and said, thank you for writing this. And it gave them the courage to leave their abusive relationships. So I think it's phenomenal. And I love the way Stephen King really gives respect to the topic, you know, in the way he explores it. So fascinating book. Highly recommend you check that one out. I'll probably say that about every Stephen King book. But so let's talk about Royal Assassin. So I absolutely love this book. Read it with John from Disquiet and Dragons. I felt like this is the things that I felt were wrong about Assassin's Quest, I felt were rectified in Royal Assassin. This was book 2. And I really felt like the way it explores the events of what happened at the end of book 1 and what Fitz does to try to recover from them. Fascinating. Really, really great stuff. I feel like I'm using the word fascinating quite a bit, but I would probably put this top of A, maybe right behind Fairy Tale. But really great. I would say this was my favorite of the Farseer trilogy so far. And this is the one that made me go, oh, I'm going to read all 16 books. So that gives you an idea of where I rank this particular one. Okay, now going into historical fiction. This was the first historical fiction book I ever read. This one is James Clavell's Shogun. Now, I knew the show was coming out. I wanted to read this before it came out. 1,300-page hardcover. How did it go? Well, I read it in 18 days. I love this book. I thought the fish out of water, story of this Blackthorn, this British, sailor on a Dutch ship, crash landing in Japan in the year 1600, and you're seeing the intersection of feudal Japan and the samurai culture with people who have never seen the Japanese before. And so much of the book is spoken through a translator. You feel like you're learning Japanese in real time as Blackthorn does. I started saying sentences and words and phrases from this book in everyday language. I fell in love with it. It was my book of the year. So I'm going to put this top of S tier, you guys, top of S tier. It is really that good. I cannot state highly enough how good this book was. It actually made me want to read historical fiction. So it introduced me to a genre of books that I'd previously ignored. So definitely top of S tier for me. Favorite book of 2024. Okay, now switching gears quite a bit. This is The Bands of Mourning, book 3 of the Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson. So if anyone knows me, they know that I felt a little bit lukewarm about Era 2 in comparison to Era 1. I thought Era 1, every book in the trilogy was a banger. The Era 2 started with Alloy of Law. I did not quite like that one at all. Honestly, I felt like the jokes fell flat. It felt like too contained a story, didn't have enough world building for me. The second book, I forget what it's called. Is it maybe Shadows of Self? I think it's Shadows of Self. I like that a little bit more. The lore was more explored. You see some characters that you saw in book 1. In trilogy 1, Era 1. And book 3 I thought was even better than book 2. So I would put this probably... I would probably put this right behind Carrie, but in the A tier. I thought this was a solid book overall. I just wish it didn't take to book 3 for me to really go, oh, I really get this series now. I really like this series, but still good. Okay, The Dead Zone. This is a very underrated Stephen King book, you guys, about a guy who, gets in a car accident, goes in a coma, wakes up, and he's suddenly able to maybe see events that haven't happened yet. And it really is prescient for the times because it talks about the idea of like, if you could stop something from happening, would you do it? Would you have the courage to do it? And I thought that was a very fascinating thing to explore as well. It's very short. It's a couple hundred pages. And I think Stephen King packed some of his best ideas into this. And there's a couple scenes in it that really stick out to me. I would say this one is above Fairy Tale. Would I put this in S tier? I think I'd put this in A tier still, but it's above Fairy Tale. Definitely a great, great Stephen King book. Okay, this is the one that got away on my 2024 year-end list. I really should have put this in the top 10, you guys. I realized it after the fact. This is Nick Cutter's The Deep. So this book is about, an expedition goes down into the deepest part of the ocean and they go missing. So one of the crew members' brothers goes down to, see what happened. Now it has twofold scares in it because it's, when you're down there, you're alone, you're isolated from the world, you're going where humanity was never meant to go. You are experiencing billions or trillions of pounds of pressure from the oceans above. And do you know what else is down there? Is it just a trick of the mind, or is there something down there? Really, really horrifying book. This was like how Stephen King at his best was in terms of horror. There's a lot of body horror in it too, so if you're squeamish, definitely letting you know that. But it is very reminiscent of Stephen King's 80s works. I would say this is S tier. Where would I put it in S tier though? I would say probably here. Yeah, right behind Return to Eden. I thought this was a fantastic book. Really, really belonged in a top 10. So sorry about that, you guys. Sometimes it's just hard to fit a top 10. I should really do it like Brian Lee Durfee does and go, here are my top 10 and then just do 25. Which if you don't know, you got to check out his channel. He's both hilarious, informative, and he's introduced me to some great books as well. So speaking of Brian Lee Durfee, actually, I did not plan that, but the next book is book 1 of his 5-Warrior Angel trilogy. Now, Brian Lee Durfee is not only a great booktuber, he's a great writer. Again, I really feel like the people who read the most books oftentimes have the most to say in terms of the writing. Like you can tell, Philip Chase's same thing, like avid fantasy reader. You can hear it in how well versus prose is. Janie Wirtz reads a lot. You can hear it in her prose. And I feel like the same thing with Brian Lee Durfee. Like I loved all the characters in this. I thought his analysis of religion and again how it could be used to manipulate the masses was really good. And this book was like 900 pages, 800 pages, some change, and I never felt there was a dull moment. I actually felt it read pretty fast. Lore was great. The nature of prophecy, what does that actually mean? I think that's really widely explored here. So I would put this probably S tier book. You guys, I feel like I have too many S tier books here. I'm going to have to probably move some stuff around. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. But right now I'm going to put this right behind Rhythm of War. This was just a great read. Only reason I haven't gotten to the other ones is because I had so many other books that I was reading throughout the year. But fantastic book. This one, The Har by David Sodergren, was recommended to me by both Cliff from Cliff's Dark Gems and John from Disquiet and Dragons. And this is kind of about this old lady who lives on an island. She's one of the last people remaining there. And these construction people want to demolish her house and basically turn it into a development. And she doesn't want to do that, right? And then a mysterious fog rolls inland. So very atmospheric, very body horror influenced, like kind of talks about rich and poor and the haves and the have-nots. And what is it like if life passes you by and you're in the twilight years of your life? I thought all those themes were really well explored in this. Is it as good as Fairy Tale and The Dead Zone? I wouldn't say quite. Is it as good as Royal Assassin? Prophet of Edan? Oh, I still liked it better than Carrie, though. Okay, I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to put it above Carrie, but behind The Prophet of Edan. So that gives you an idea of how good I thought this book was. Now, moving on to the last few here. The Heroes by Joe Abercrombie. So this was book 5, book 2 of his Standalones, book 5 in his First Law series. Where did this rank? I don't think this one quite hit the highs of Best Served Cold for me. I thought this was good. But was it great? There were some plotting elements of this one, actually. I think out of all the 5 books I read, I felt like this was the most plotting. But I still loved it. I thought the characters and the ideas of what does it mean to be a hero if there are no good guys. I thought that was a fascinating take on the hero, good guy, bad guy story. So I would still put this top of B, but I don't know that it necessarily hit the highs of, some of the other First Law books that I've read so far. Okay, so let's actually start with Shadow of the Gods. So Shadow of the Gods was book 1 of the Bloodsworn saga. Now, no small secret for me that myself and John from Disquiet Dragons, who had read it, we both kind of felt a little lukewarm on this one. Didn't quite hit it for us. Felt like the characters were harder to get into, and it was a shame because I love John Gwynne. Almost said Joe Abercrombie. John Gwynne. I love his works. He was 7 for 7 for me up until this point. They were all A's and S's. This one didn't quite hit that for me. I think I would put it probably bottom of B personally in terms of personal enjoyment, but that was slowly rectified or quickly rectified after when we read Hunger of the Gods. I thought this did everything that I had hoped for in the Shadow of the Gods. With the Hunger of the Gods, characters were way more memorable. I felt like where it ends off is a great cliffhanger. I'm actually really excited to read The Fury of the Gods now. Previously, I was a little lukewarm on it. So I would say probably an A, maybe somewhere around here. Yeah, let's put it here for now. I would say Hunger of the Gods, solid A, right in the middle. Okay, speaking of S-tier books, you guys, Guy Gavriel Kay's The Lions of Al-Rasan, one of the most unique books I read last year. This is kind of a medieval Spain fantasy historical fiction novel. It's got Middle Eastern influences. This was recommended to me by Josh from Red Fury Books. And, I'd wanted to start with Guy Gavriel Kay. He mentioned this to be a good place to start. I'm so glad I started here. So, Josh, thank you, man, because you have now officially started me on my Guy Gavriel Kay journey. This one was solid S tier. Where in S tier? That is hard to say. I would say it's head-to-head with the Gowan. I would say it's right up here. Yeah, I'm going to put it here for now. I think solid S tier. Really, really great book. Definitely looking forward to checking out more of Guy Gavriel Kay's beautiful writing. Another beautiful writer here. Okay, The Lost Metal. Brandon Sanderson, book 4. The Lost Metal is of Era 2 of Mistborn. I'm getting tired, you guys. I was talking for almost an hour straight. My brain starts to get a little scrambled here. But this is the finale of Mistborn Era 2. Now, I liked it much more even than Bands of Mourning. So I'm going to definitely rank it higher than Bands of Mourning. Where did I rank Bands of Mourning now? Here. Okay. I would probably rank it a little bit higher than that, but a little bit lower than Carrie. I thought that, Sanderson talked about how the gloves are off and it's, going to be a lot more Cosmere heavy. And I love that aspect of it. I actually would love to do a reread of this now after reading Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson, because now so much more of the Cosmere has been explored. I want to kind of see more of those connections. I think I would get more out of it reading it or on a reread. But so far, a solid A book. I thought it was very good. Good way to close out the Mistborn Era 2. Now, going to a couple of clunkers for me, unfortunately. Not chonkers, but clunkers. The Night House had such great premise. There was a little bit of a murder mystery. A kid and his friend are in a telephone booth. Mysterious voice answers. The kid gets sucked into the telephone booth. Nobody believes him, of course. Very Stephen King-esque. First third of it, fantastic setup. After that, fell off a cliff for me. I just didn't care about the characters anymore. Just didn't really care for it at all. I would say it was definitely worse than All Systems Red. I wouldn't read this again. I probably wouldn't recommend this. I think this was a D for me. I would still check out another Joe Nesbo book, but I would definitely go in cautiously. For me, personally, writing style, the character development, everything besides the premise didn't really do it for me. And also, I'm not really into just page turner for the sake of page turner, if that makes sense. I really need to care about the characters, and it was hard for me to do so in this book. I even felt like the protagonist was like unlikable as well. So it's tough to contend with. Now this next one, The Winter Soldier by Daniel Mason. So I want to read more Daniel Mason. I felt like I didn't give this enough of a fair shake. I also read it on audio before I realized that audio is not for me when it comes to fiction. So I would probably rate this. I think I would rate this above Night House, but I would probably rate this as a D for me. I didn't quite gel with his writing. I felt like it was a little bit presumptuous at times. Just didn't really click for me. I'm sorry, you guys, for any Daniel Mason fans out there, but let me know in the comments if you would recommend anything else, because I'm always down to check out another one. I never tried to go one and done with an author because, sometimes you just get a bad fit for you. So let me know what you think. Then the next book, let's see here. Stephen King's Under the Dome. What a banger. This is top 10 material for me. So Under the Dome is about a mysterious glass dome that comes over a small town and kind of how humanity starts to devolve as that happens. They're cut off from the rest of the world. I thought this was S-tier King. I thought this was just an amazing book. I would probably rank this really highly. I'm going to actually put this right around here. I thought it was, a lot of people say it was bloated, or I didn't get that. I felt like he perfected what he did in Needful Things, which was cast of characters, like 50 people in a town, and you get to know every single one. I thought that aspect of it was phenomenal. I thought the evil that people do to each other, phenomenal. I thought the villain, phenomenal. You love to hate him, So really great book. Okay, down to the last four. Let's talk about Warbreaker. So this is going to be a hot take from me. It didn't quite gel with me. Honestly, I love the magic system. I love the setup. I think maybe a reread would make me like it more, but I did read this in the latter part of the year. I don't know, Sanderson just hasn't been hitting for me in the same way this year, with the exception of that reread of Rhythm of War, and maybe that just goes to show I got to do a reread of some of these at some point. Don't know when I'll get to it, but I would probably put this at the bottom of B. Not quite as enjoyable as The Shadow of the Gods, but still quite enjoyable. What Moves the Dead? T. Kingfisher. This was my first T. Kingfisher book. It's kind of like a novella. It incorporates the House of Usher characters. There's some fungal growths on the property. They all look old and decrepit. What's happening there? A lot of body horror, weird suspense. Great book. I really thought this was a solid book. I would probably put this in A, maybe in the bottom of A, somewhere around here, probably, if I was to be honest. Yeah, probably there. Okay, Wind and Truth. So this is going to be an interesting one. Wind and Truth, I felt... So when I first read it, I felt that, this is going to be top 10 material. I love the 10-day structure. A lot of people didn't like the 10-day structure. It's very different to the other Stormlight Archive books. It had a lot of different POVs. You would expect a book like this to be tying up loose ends, and it was actually expanding the world far beyond. I actually loved the way it ended in a lot of ways. I felt like it kind of needed to happen in order for books 6 through 10 to mean something in the wider Cosmere, as well as in the Stormlight Archive. So I really did like that aspect. I think certain things with the prose really griped me. I think maybe it's because I read so many good books this year, but I felt like there was one thing I really loved about Brandon Sanderson's views on mental health and how to tackle them in books, where he always did it with nuance. They were heavy-handed at times, but it was never distracting. In this one, it was distracting. It's like somebody says, like, "Oh, are you a god?" And he's like, "No, I'm a therapist." Like, it's just weird, kind of shoehorned in things that I felt like if he just given it a little bit more delicacy in the way he handled that stuff, I think it could have been really a banger of a book. And also, I was also wondering why every single character had a mental health struggle. It's like, it almost didn't feel realistic at a point, because it's like, okay, a couple of them having that, going through that and going through that arc, then it starts to feel like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's something that they're doing. It's a personal journey. But some of that stuff didn't land for me, but I would probably put this in B. I would probably put this top of B. I thought it was, again, solid. Sanderson, Stormlight, can't really go wrong. I would say, yeah, I'm going to keep it top of B. So I realized, you guys, okay, hold on one second. I'm going to just pull up one more thumbnail. Right, you know what? I'm gonna rank these two together. Sorry about this, you guys. But so I read Ken Follett's Century Trilogy this year. I read 2 of the 3 books. I read Fall of Giants and Winter of the World. Let me see if I have. I thought I had Fall of Giants somewhere. Maybe I forgot to. Huh. I guess I didn't have it. Oh, damn it. Okay, well, we're just going to have to make do. So I read Fall of Giants, the first book in the Century Trilogy, and then I read Winter of the World. So where would these rank? I would say I would rank both of these as S tier books. I thought they were that great. I would rank one after another. So if I had to compare the two, I would say The Fall of Giants, which started in the World War I women's suffrage movement and the Russian Revolution, versus Winter of the World, which was World War II and kind of the events leading up to that. It's basically about these 5 families that make their way through 100 years of world history. I thought both were phenomenal. I thought the character work was great. Even the events about history, you see them from a different perspective because you're seeing them from the ground floor of these characters. So I really felt like both of these books were great. If I was to rank them, I would probably put Fall of Giants just a hair above Winter of the World, but I would say they were both in contention for top 10 of the year for me. I'm going to probably put them here. So presumably the 4th entry here would have been Fall of Giants. And sorry about that, you guys. And then it would be Winter of the World next. So that's what I felt as far as a tier list. Whew, you guys, I didn't even take a water break. I'm pretty tired, so I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was useful for you all. Let me know if you want me to do more tier lists, and maybe I'll, take more breathing exercises or something. Hey, keep some water and coffee handy. Says maybe a rookie mistake, but this is hopefully the first or second of many tier lists to come. So let me know what you think of this list. Do you hate it? Do you love it? Do you love to hate it? Do you hate to love it? Let me know in the comments. Please like and subscribe. It always helps out the channel. Share this with a friend if you think that they would enjoy this. Always helps me out. So there's some links in the description to check out. And I really hope you enjoyed this. I've been very excited to do this tier list for you all. So I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. Please be good to yourselves. Please be good to each other. And I'll see you on the next video as always. Take care.